Rain poured endlessly over the quiet New York neighborhood, casting a gray shadow over everything. Inside his grand mansion, Daniel Carter sat alone, sipping coffee by the window. Once a driven man, now a withdrawn millionaire, Daniel had grown numb to the world outside his wealth. His life was silent, still, until an unexpected knock broke through the quiet. Curious, he opened the door and was met by a heartbreaking sight. A woman, drenched from head to toe, stood trembling on his doorstep. Her clothes were tattered, her face pale, and her eyes, tired yet pleading, locked onto his. With a fragile voice, she asked, "Can I clean your house, for a plate of food?" Her words were soaked in humility and hunger. Daniel's first instinct was to turn her away. He had grown distant from emotion, from people. But just as he began to step back, something about her stopped him. A familiar sadness in her eyes. A softness in her voice that tugged at a buried memory. He stared, frozen, as recognition dawned. There was something about her that felt known, significant. The rain fell harder outside, but inside, time had paused. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he simply stared, conflicted, stunned. This woman wasn't just another soul lost in the storm. There was a connection here. A thread from his past had just knocked on his present. And in that moment, everything began to change, not just for her, but for him too. Daniel stood motionless at the door, staring at the woman before him as the storm raged behind her. Her face, though weathered by time and hardship, awakened a memory so powerful it made his chest tighten. Years ago, long before the money, before the mansion, Daniel had lived on the streets, cold, hungry, and invisible to the world. In those darkest days, there had been one person who had shown him kindness. A waitress at a rundown diner who would quietly slip him a sandwich or cup of soup, always with a warm smile and a note that read, "You matter." Looking at the woman now, he realized, she was that waitress. The same gentle soul who had seen value in him when no one else did. She hadn't recognized him yet, he looked nothing like the scared, skinny young man from back then. But he remembered every moment, how those meals had given him the strength to keep going, to believe in something more. She had saved him in the most human way. Now, the roles had reversed. She was the one in need, tired, hungry, and forgotten by the world. And fate had led her to the door of the very man she had once helped survive. Daniel's heart pounded with emotion. He hadn't thought about those days in years. But this was no coincidence. It was a full-circle moment. The universe had brought her back to him, and this time, it was his turn to save her. Daniel guided her inside without saying much. The warmth of the mansion contrasted sharply with her soaked clothes and shivering body. She hesitated, looking around with wide eyes, unsure if she truly belonged in a place like this. Daniel motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table, then began preparing a meal, not just leftovers, but something real: grilled salmon, warm bread, fresh salad, and hot tea. She sat in silence, watching him, unsure why a stranger would show her such kindness. When he placed the plate in front of her, she stared at it for a moment before whispering, "Thank you. I haven't eaten in 2 days." Her voice cracked with emotion as she picked up the fork slowly, as if afraid it might all disappear. Between bites, she shared pieces of her story, how she had worked at a small diner for nearly 20 years, how the pandemic had shut it down, how medical bills and rent piled up until she lost everything. "I used to help people, you know. I wasn't always like this." Her words trembled as she looked down, ashamed. Daniel listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't tell her who he was. Not yet. The woman who once helped him with silent generosity now sat before him, broken and alone. And he knew in his heart, this moment wasn't just about giving her a meal. It was about giving her dignity. And the chance to feel seen again. Later that evening, the rain had stopped, but the storm of emotions inside Daniel hadn't. The woman, now a little warmer and more relaxed, sat quietly by the fireplace, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and gratitude. Daniel finally sat across from her and gently broke the silence. "Do you remember a boy who used to sit outside your diner every night, cold, hungry, barely able to lift his head?" he asked. She looked at him, confused at first, then her eyes widened. "Wait, the quiet boy in the torn hoodie? I used to leave food for him." Daniel nodded, his voice soft. "That boy was me." Her hand flew to her mouth in shock. She studied his face again, and now she saw it. The same eyes, just older, stronger. "You? But, how?" Daniel smiled gently. "You gave me more than food. You gave me hope when I had nothing. That kindness saved my life." He paused, then stood and walked to his desk, pulling out a folder. He handed it to her. Inside were plans for a community kitchen, one that would provide free meals, support, and training to people in need. "I want you to run it. You know what it means to help people. You already changed one life. Now let's change hundreds." Tears streamed down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a burden, but as someone with purpose. And in that moment, two lives began healing, together. 1 year later, the once-forgotten woman stood proudly behind the counter of a vibrant community kitchen, her name stitched into her apron, Martha, manager. The room was alive with warmth, children laughing, volunteers serving hot meals, and people in need being welcomed with dignity and kindness. The walls were decorated with photos of smiling faces, and a sign above the entrance read, "You matter." The same words she used to write on napkins for Daniel all those years ago. Martha moved gracefully between tables, offering warm food and warmer smiles. Her eyes no longer carried the weight of shame or hunger, but a sense of pride, purpose, and peace. The woman who once knocked on a stranger's door for a plate of food had become a light for others. In the corner, Daniel watched quietly, his heart full. He didn't need applause or recognition. Seeing Martha shine, seeing lives being changed, that was his reward. One little act of kindness had come full circle. A sandwich in the past had led to hundreds of meals today. A simple gesture had sparked a chain reaction of compassion and second chances. As a young boy received a bowl of soup and looked up with a hopeful smile, Martha bent down and gently whispered, "You matter." And in that moment, it was clear. When we lift someone up, we rise together. Because sometimes, the smallest kindness becomes someone's biggest miracle.